May I ask that you stand up and get ready and prepare yourself. Please help me welcoming Dr. Denise Lamothe. Dr. Denise, come on up. Yay!
Thank you, my dear. So what I'm going to do is share a story. The story is about my own, I'd say, emergence into a motivational life from a really dormant, negative, depressing life. And then, at the end, if we have time, I'd love to hear some of your stories and kind of what got your mojo going as you were living your life and going along your path. So when I was younger, and it's important to know this, I had self-esteem that was like about this much. Some people are nodding, so I'm not the only one. I flunked out of college, first year, got all Fs, 1 A in tennis. That was something, right? But not enough to really raise my self-esteem level or to light my fire, so to speak. So then I went to Hawaii, and I thought, I'll find myself. What I found was a lot of difficulty, a lot of poverty, and I know what it's like not to have a job. So I lived homeless, actually, on the streets of Honolulu for some time. And a 19-year-old young woman that I was met a 20-year-old surfer. Love at first sight. Now, as I look back on retrospect, I know I felt I better marry this guy. Because if I don't marry this guy, I might never get another chance. No one may ever want me. So I married my surfer at 19 years old, and I had 3 kids, just like that. So now I was in my 20s, early 20s, working in a shoe factory, parenting 3 children, and I found out that my husband was not exactly Prince Charming, I must say. So my life was not very happy. And I spent my life reading Victoria Holt romance novels. Do you ever hear of her? You're laughing, you have. You don't still read those, do you? No. Well, it's okay if you do.
I live them.
She lives the romance novels. That's fantastic. Well, this is how it was for me. I would get out of bed in the morning, drag myself out, 1 foot on the floor, the other foot on the floor, and I would look at my bed and I would say, oh, I wish it was time to get back into you. Now, I just slept 8 or 10 hours, but I was waking up exhausted. Some of you may be able to relate to some of this because I do see some heads moving. Well, as my husband and I were trying to survive with our 3 children and pretty much no money, we met some friends who liked to go camping out in the desert. We would go to the Anza Borrego Desert and we would set up tents because it didn't cost anything. And a lot of the people that we would camp with rode motorcycles. And they liked to go off and ride on the sand dunes and things. And I thought, that looks like a lot of fun. So I wanted to do this. Well, we saved up our pennies, my husband and I, and we bought 2 little Kawasaki motorcycles. And I mean little, the wheels were like this big. I think little kids ride these. So you get on your bike like this. Well, we picked up our bikes, came out of the dealer, got to the stop sign, and he said, let's go left. And I said, right. Right there in front of the dealership. We crashed into each other. We both fell over, broke our headlamps, wrecked our bikes. It was a very bad beginning, but things get better. So we got up, we went on our way, and I learned to ride that little bike. And that was fun. And that I started to notice that I was getting a little bit of energy doing that. I wasn't getting too much energy from the diapers and the babies. And the shoe factory, I must say, was not my most fulfilling job opportunity, although it had its pluses. I'll think about that. So then we would go to the desert and we would ride on the motorcycles. And I had a few experiences of falling in cactus. Do you know that if you sit down on a cactus, that you will get these spikes in your body? And they have barbs on the end, and you can't just pull them out. You live with them for a really long time, and they work their way out, they fester their way out. Well, I learned that. It was valuable. So then I started to outgrow my little tiny bike, and I wanted something bigger, a little more power, and I was starting with a little bit of confidence. And I was feeling much better. So I said to my husband, I would like a faster, larger bike. So he went out and he bought me a bike called a Penton. Ever heard of a Penton, anyone? I'm not surprised that you haven't. It's a killing machine. The reason he got the Penton for me was because it was very cheap. And it was very cheap because it had only one speed, super fast. So I was determined now to learn how to ride this thing. So I got on, and it was a matter of turn it on and off you go. And I had so many falls. For years, I never wore short pants. I never wore short sleeves. I looked like I had been battered. I was covered with bruises. I was a real mess. So I learned how to stay upright. It was a survival thing, really. But then later, I was actually married to another person down the road. And he said, why are you riding that Penton? You are going to kill yourself. You haven't yet, but that's only luck. So he bought me a motorcycle that was much more appropriate. And I was able to ride on the trails. I was able to go on power lines. I was able to do a lot of off-road riding that I was flying over, really, on the Penton. I would do fly over, crash and burn, fly over, crash and burn, and that's how it went. So I got on my bike. It was a Kawasaki, I think it was like an 85 or something like that. Not huge, but I'm not huge, so it was just about right for me. Well, I really loved it, and my confidence level continued to go up. And then what was the next step? Any idea?
A Harley.
Do you have a Harley?
No, but my stepson does.
No, that wasn't the next step. No, a Harley would be, I think, more appropriate for the road, but I was in the woods.
Okay.
But the next step for me was to be a facilitator in a club that we made called the Merrimack Valley Trail Riders. And some of you are nodding, you perhaps have heard of it. It's pretty popular now. And we started this club, started the group, and people in the Merrimack Valley Trail Riders would go out and race. And they would race enduros. You know what an enduro is? An enduro is an off-road race. What you do is you go out on a course, and hidden along the way, there are checkpoints. If you come into a checkpoint late, you get a point for each minute that you're late. If you come into a checkpoint early, you get 3 points for each minute that you're early. The goal of the race is to finish the enduro with no points. And in order to do that, you would need to maintain 25 miles an hour through any terrain. I want you to know, when I say any terrain, I'm not kidding, any terrain. We went up power lines like this, mud holes. First enduro that I did ride, I did do these for a long time. I was third best in New England for female motorcycle racing in the enduro class, but that wasn't because I was so spectacular, to be honest. It was because there really weren't very many women doing this at the time. Maybe there were 3. I don't know, but it wasn't I'm telling you, it wasn't a huge group. But the first time that I rode an enduro, we were somewhere in the Berkshires, and my husband was so excited I was going to do this. And I got on my bike, and I was really confident, and I had my helmet, I had my jacket, I had my kidney belt, I had my big boots. I was ready to go. Off I went. He had the kids. I came into the first checkpoint right on the minute. Wow, they couldn't believe it. I was the only one. I had a perfect race to the first checkpoint. Went downhill after that. Way downhill, actually. At the end of the day, all the riders were back at camp, except for me. And he waited, and he waited, and he waited, and it got dark, and he waited, and he waited, and he was still waiting, and it got darker and darker, and he was starting to get really scared. And people were starting to wonder where I was. Well, I was in a mud hole. And I was very distressed to learn that I was in this mud hole helping other people get through. And I helped the last person get through. We actually put logs down so that she could ride out up the other side of the bank. And I thought, she'll stop and park her bike because I'm helping her. She'll come back and she'll help me up the logs. No, she went up the logs, she was gone. I was by myself. So I splashed around the mud hole for a long time. And when I finally came into camp, and we have a photo of this, I came driving in and I was so excited that I finished. All you see is black with the whites of my eyes and my teeth. I was totally covered with mud. But I was energized. I was excited. And this was something way, way different than being a young wife and a mother with no money struggling to get by. And I loved it. And it lit a fire for me.